Good afternoon and welcome to this GIRI forum, the first in a series of 3 spring forums dedicated to getting it right in design. This is an interactive session, and so please get ready to contribute with your thoughts and comments. I'm pleased to be joined today by GIRI board member Gavin Pike of Bennetts Associates Architects, who led the recent re-edit of the GIRI Design Guide, and Nick Francis, who is Education Director at GTC, the GIRI training arm. I'm going to give a short introduction about GIRI for those of you who are less familiar with us, and then hand over to Nick to lead the session. On the housekeeping front, can I ask you to keep your microphones muted if not speaking, but remember to turn them on in the breakout sessions and if invited to ask or answer a question. If you don't mind, please leave on your video, because that way we feel the meeting has more vitality. If any questions come to mind as we go through, please use the chat box, and Nick will try and pick up during the panel discussion at the end. We'll keep a record of the chat and seek to answer any outstanding queries after the event. If you have any tech problems, please adopt the usual IT support tactic. Turn off and try again. I leave the meeting and rejoin using the same link. Many of you may be familiar with GIRI to a greater or lesser extent, but I think it's worth just reflecting on some key points about the origins of our thinking and our key messaging. In 2016, we carried out research into the cost of error in construction. The results showed how much waste was caused by error, 21% of turnover. Direct cost, the NCRs and daily problems we see, was 5%. Indirect cost, that impact on other parties causing delay and disruption, a cost of 7% of turnover. Unrecorded process waste is where errors occur but they're not recorded, 6%, and latent defects 3%, which we've all come across. It might be a bit higher or lower, but it's the right order of magnitude. And if you think that the total GDP of construction in the UK is about 100 billion, it looks at like 21 billion pounds is being wasted per annum. If an average construction company makes 2 to 3% profit, they're doing pretty well. So it's a no-brainer, we need to do something about it. GIRI was established following the original research as a not-for-profit membership-based organisation. And this is the strategic aim originally was just to improve industry productivity through the elimination of error, and we became a limited company in 2017. The research demonstrated the link between error elimination and productivity, and this helped to convince businesses in the industry as to the benefits of investing in a zero-error programme. But the world is changing, and boardrooms are now recognising the much broader range of imperatives they need to satisfy, including safety, sustainability and quality. An error-free strategy provides a platform for achieving all these objectives, and our strategic aim now reflects this. So let's take a quick look at how GIRI is going about seeking to achieve its objectives. There's the thought leadership. On the training front, GIRI has developed training courses covering leadership, interface management and supervisory training. And we've recently added trainer training. These all are CITB accredited, which means they qualify levy payers to receive grants. The recent increase in CITB grant per person on an accredited course means that our courses are now extremely cost effective, and you can book them on our website. We have campaigns. Communication campaigns are key in ensuring our message are broadly spread. And then we have forums such as this one to help focus productive ideas and actions. We share knowledge through our research, which is available on our website. We're very active in social media, and we have 4 members meetings per annum, which provide a good outlet for networking. And our next meeting is at the ICE on the 17th of May. So let's look at the benefits. Alongside the clear productivity gains, there's an impact on safety. An Australian study found 37% of accidents occur during rework. On the sustainability front, if we're avoiding waste, we're improving our carbon footprint, and the quality benefit is pretty manifest. Correcting error takes time and money by doing the same job twice. Correcting error, if we avoid the error, it can improve our outturns in terms of price and completion and will be more predictable. Overall, the effect will be a better reputation for individual companies and the industry as a whole. We need to have the right culture throughout the industry so that people feel empowered to act in ways which reduce error. We need to change the way we work and behave now. If we do that, we'll have an industry that is more cost effective and has a better reputation. Now let's hear from Nick.
That's great. Thanks, Cliff. And hello, everyone. It's really great. I think we're up over 70 people on the call now, which is quite exciting to see how much interest there is in the link between design and preventing error in construction. So this is the first of three webinars, three forums that we're going to run on this theme. And in this forum, we're looking at what are the attributes of a design process that reduces the chance of error in construction. So that's this one. The next one is going to look at how we make design decisions. How do we make decisions that meet the needs we're trying to meet? And the third one will look at how do we meet the needs of the future? So how do we know we're even trying to design the right stuff? So you can see we're going through a sort of continuum. Now, in this session, we're very lucky to be joined by Gavin Pike, who was the lead author of the updated GIRI design guide. So what we're going to do this session is we're going to start by having a very brief discussion about what do we all think are the characteristics of design that prevents error. We'll then hear from Gavin and hear a video which will introduce the GIRI design guide. And then we'll have some breakout groups and some further discussion to ask you, how can you practically apply the things in the GIRI design guide and how do these work in practice? So that's what we're going to do. So the first question I'm going to throw at all of you, please, is what do you think are the characteristics of a design process that prevents error in construction? And you might just put down a couple of words, but what we'll do is we'll use the chat box. So it's probably bottom right of your screen, which I think is probably down there if I'm working this out correctly. But bottom right of your screen, there's a chat box, and we'll have a fastest fingers first competition. But please write in there anything that you think characterizes good design that prevents error in construction. Okay, we've got Adrian getting in there first. Simplicity of approach, simplicity of design. Interesting. Okay. Kane says collaborative. We've got a good brief. Collins mentioned coordinated. Dean says communication. A clear brief again. We've got a few of those. Design review, peer review, communication, clash detection, requirements defined. Okay, so it's quite clear that there are a number of themes immediately appearing here, aren't there? There's things about the scope, understanding what's required, things about communicating with each other, things about clash detection, so getting that complexity wedded together. Let's see if there's anything else. Oh, we've got one from MC, says scope and process, clarity of requirements, competent designers. James Guy, do you want to comment on that? That sounds like it might be a it might be coming from personal experience. Can you expand on that one?
From experience, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I've been in construction for quite a while. But what I see is that a lot of the designers tend to use a lot of trainees. You get a lot of youngsters come up through, and they don't necessarily know everything that's needed to design a complete system, and that can have a real compound or cause issues for us trying to build it from an operations perspective.
Interesting. Okay, yeah. So not inadequate experience can lead to problems that then get picked up by someone else later on. We've got a mention here of Nathan. You've mentioned about continuous improvement used, and you mentioned the Deming cycle. I wonder, Nathan, maybe you could just expand on What do you mean by continuous improvement in terms of design?
Yeah, learning along the way and getting to the end of a design stage and checking your design. And the design's a very iterative process. You've got to keep going around those feedback loops and making sure you're improving at every stage, really.
Interesting. Thank you. Okay, well, what I'll do, I will capture all of your comments and I will stick them in a whiteboard so we can have a look at those later. But what I'll do now is I will hand over to Gavin, and Gavin can then give an introduction to the GIRI design guide, and we can see how that relates to what you've all just said in the last few minutes. So Gavin, over to you.
Afternoon all. Some relevant comments there, actually. I think we've all seen those comments many times, actually. And you know, the guide itself actually attempts to respond to a number of them. Nick, I can't see the presentation at the moment. It's coming. So I'm just going to give you a very quick sort of recap about the guide that we've been working on for the last year and the update. Some of the slides I'm about to present will be familiar to some of you, but I think it's quite useful just to have a quick recap, and we can come back later and talk about some of these points. So you'd like to go to the next slide. So the original guide was produced and published as a hard copy, actually, format in 2018, but since then it's undertaken an extensive update, including the text and the chapter headings. And we launched it at the members' annual review last November, and hopefully most of you were there and saw that launch. I suppose the most significant change is the fact that it was a hard copy format, but now it's an online tool, so it now resides on the GIRI website, so it's much more accessible to everyone. We go to the next slide, please. So I thought, again, this is a slide that, you know, one would hope a lot of you have seen before, but it helps to sort of play some context to what we're doing. So as Cliff mentioned, there was a research paper which was created in 2016, and as a result of that research paper, it concluded that these were the sort of top 10 root causes of error in construction. But what's really important, if we flip to the next slide, and actually relevant to the conversation today, is that 5 of those top 10 relate to design. And that's not design just, you know, that involves early design, but also design throughout the construction process as well. So this was one of the main drivers really for us to create the guide in the first place. So we flip to the next slide. And the other driver is, again, as Cliff mentioned earlier in his presentation, was the cost of error, and which is estimated, again, you know, a number of years ago to be around about 21 billion pounds in the construction industry. So one would expect that figure to be higher now. But you know, essentially the guide was produced as a best practice document highlighting the importance of a robust design process, but critically for what it also highlighted is its relevance to all parties involved in the construction process. So how it was relevant to our client, but also, you know, obviously for contractors, but of course the design team as well. It reinforces the need to set up and effectively manage the design process to ensure a successful project. In doing so, it outlines a series of recommendations, they're 12 in number, which range from creating the right culture, ensuring investment in regards to fees and resources, and also the importance, for example, of early contractor input. But it should also be remembered that there are other benefits as well from the guide, benefits associated with safety, quality, and productivity. So it's not just about reducing costs. And finally, it's not just a guide for designers, it's also a guide for clients, for contractors and specialist designers, you know, everybody who's involved in the construction industry. Okay, so we move on to the next slide. So when you open the website now on the GIRI website, you're presented with the 12 recommendations. They're no longer a hierarchy. The original hard copy format, you know, established it's kind of a hierarchy in which, you know, we'd imagine how people would approach a project. But now, essentially, you know, we try to remove that hierarchy and allow users to roam freely throughout the site, you know, because obviously there might be a specific topic that you want to, you know, engage with, for example, brief, or, you know, stakeholder management, for example. So if you click on any one of these links on the website, you'll be presented with a common page to each of the recommendations. If you flip to the next slide, Nick. This is an example of the robust approach. So again, the structure for each of these recommendations are identical. It starts by providing a brief introduction on the topic, the relevance of that topic, why it's important, but perhaps most importantly, what are the desired outcomes and what actions need to be progressed. So we flick to the next slide. Each section then concludes by establishing a key goal. And then there's a table of practical steps and their purpose. And again, that's kind of derived from the body of the text within the actual content of the website and under each recommendation. So there's a continual sort of refresh and link to to what you've been reading. And I suppose the other important thing as well that none of these issues, none of these recommendations are isolated. They're all interlinked with the other topics and recommendations within the website. So on the right hand side and throughout the document there are sort of hyperlinks to the other recommendations if to continue sort of learning and with regards to the relevant input. I think that's the last slide, and what we're going to do now is share the video that we also created and was first aired, as it were, last November. And what this will do, will just take you through an explanation for, with for members of the construction industry, and we'll just explain to you sort of the actual, a little bit more information about the topics and recommendations themselves.
We work at the front end, working with clients as they evolve their brief, right the way through to production of design information for construction on site. So we're designers.
Our main role is to provide the vision of the architects and the client, but we make damn well sure that the mathematics is right.
At Heathrow, we talk about it's like operating on a live patient. We need to be ensuring that that's right first time. We can't have error, because the error might mean that passengers the next day aren't able to fly.
There's a really multidisciplinary project. We have everything from urban design, architecture, landscape, art and culture, ergonomics, security design, design delivery.
We're about 70 strong. We started up in 1987. And we've always been passionate about engaging with the industry, making sure we collaborate with others. That's engineers, clients, of course, contractors.
We analyse situations and look at what are the challenges and what are the opportunities. Sometimes that's to tell our client not to buy a building, not to do a project. And sometimes it's to say, actually, if you want to buy a building and do a project, this is the way you might think about it.
So recognising the significance of design as a root cause for error, the GIRI community decided that what was necessary or what would be helpful was guidance for designers about what they needed to do, how they needed to set themselves up to make sure that their process generated error-free outputs.
What is done is given some key topics, key headlines, which I believe every designer and contractor should bear in mind as they go through their career, their process, their projects.
Getting the right team culture right from the beginning, getting like-minded people with shared objectives, with a sense of empathy, so that the culture of the project is really good right from the start. And that a client can help to do a lot, because they can select the right people, make sure they're empowered to do their jobs.
Creating a culture where people have very high standards, so they really do try and produce content that is clear, coherent, correct. So you build a culture of quality in your output.
We have a set of cultural values, which are integrity, respect, leadership and safety, which are really critical to the organisation and how we work together.
A good client will select the right design team and the right contractor and then pay them the right money. And if everything is driven by lowest possible price, then you don't want to be in that project race.
As the client, it is absolutely our responsibility to ensure the designers have enough time and resources to be able to completely interrogate and communicate the design so that we eliminate the most amount of errors we can.
It's often said that if you do something on the cheap right at the beginning, the cost will catch you out in the end, the cost will rise. So proper investment at the right time is actually a good investment for a stable, well-built project.
The whole process is deeply collaborative. It involves people from the totality of the supply chain, including clients, because it turns out that we're all in it together. The cause of an error may well be sit miles away from them and outside their organisation in a different part of the supply chain. And so we'll not sort this problem out unless people collaborate.
To make sure that we get that right collaborative relationship between us and the contractors, we have what's called integrated project teams. So kind of collaborative, small collaborative team from HS2 working in the contractors team.
What collaboration does, it creates those safe spaces so you can hear everybody's voices and remove those assumptions that you may have made about different people and parts of their design.
Fundamentally, understanding constraints is the beginning of design. And once you understand the constraints, short-term and long-term, you can make a design that addresses the short-term and long-term problems. So don't think of compromise, think of understanding constraints as your design generator.
So design is a process, and for it to be done well, it needs to be well planned. So you need to articulate what your outcomes are, what the outputs are, what the inputs are, who the people are, in what order are they going to do their things, what are the interfaces, and you put all of that together into some kind of framework or plan, which you then deliver.
The first stage of the design is working out the potential for that site to receive a building, or for that building on that site to be adapted and extended. And that is the fundamental brief building exercise, which can take anything from 3 months to something like when we worked above Crossrail in an oversight development, 5 years.
In terms of being the client, we are the first step in the design journey. It is about understanding and communicating those design requirements very clearly so everybody has the best possible chance of designing something without error.
I think in any project, the brief is the client's tool to make sure that they know what they want to start with, they don't mislead people, they set the programme up in the right way, and they're very clear about what their outcomes and delivery aspects are.
We provide information so that everybody in the team understands what we're doing, because that understanding means you got minimum amount of errors happening, and people can ask questions, and you're open to answer them.
We design viaducts. If we just do the engineering, but without thinking about the environmental integration or the low carbon aspects or the kind of requirements of the local community, at some point we're going to have to go back and redo it. And that costs a lot of time and money. So trying to make sure that you've got all the right stakeholders in the room early and that you're having the right dialogue and you've got the right balance is essential.
In my experience, design can go wrong when you have made an assumption that the stakeholders understand what they want. So sometimes when they ask for a certain thing, and if you don't interrogate that or you don't understand what it is that they are actually asking for, you can design one thing and they need something else.
Design is a process, but it's not straight through. It involves different iterations, so we do things over and over again. It also involves, very importantly, the idea of opening up or expanding thought and ideas, and then picking one and closing down.
Opening up is very chaotic, and, it's all about relationships and everything. It's the whole design process. Closing down is much more logical. Management, you need to have discipline in terms of some key milestones to provide information when it's needed, so that people can say, okay, we've ticked that box off. What's the next box we've got to tick? So you need both.
Increasingly, as part of a profile of better building and lower carbon and more intelligent construction, we are bringing our contractors forward in our engagement. We are, working with some contractors from very early stages.
The contractors immediately got it because they're much more aware of they see error in construction every single day.
In our organization, especially for the very big, tall projects, towers and things, we always go through a process. And when a contractor comes on board, we are prepared to redesign the process because it's all about what the equipment that's available out there that can make it work. Rather than saying, you just got to do this, you're the contractor, do what I tell you. No, you do not get the best product that way.
The last thing you want is to get right to the end. You've done all of your work, and then the first time you've properly checked anything, you find out it doesn't work, and you've got to go all the way back to the beginning.
If you don't do the right thing at the right time, then you have to rework it. And particularly with design, if you don't put the right design markers in at the right place, then you have to go back and do them again.
So I believe strongly in the idea of the sort of, if you like, you might call it a controlling mind on the design process, which might be the lead designer's job, but somebody needs to do it. Otherwise, things tend not to go well.
There are other recommendations in there about having a sort of independent kind of control over the project from the design perspective. And I think that's really important to keep the bigger picture in mind, and not to get too caught up in the detail, particularly when there's a lot of complex engineering at stake.
So like a lot of these guidelines, it's also the attitude that you take to it. It's a reference tool to make you think harder and better about what you're doing.
The difference between high-performing and substantial, like plus or minus 25 or 30%. And one of the characteristics of the high-performing projects is that they adopt best practice in relation to the design process.
It allows you to spend a bit of time thinking about each of those key elements in relationship to the work you do. And I do believe moving forward, it's likely that it becomes part of the procedures that people, some of it's ephemeral, but they're procedures which people have to embrace. And in doing so, I think it'll help our industry.
Okay, so really interesting to see that a lot of the comments that were made when we first started talking about this seem to be being echoed there through the design guide. So I just wonder, does anyone, we'll use the chat box again because there are quite a lot of us, anyone pick up anything in that video that resonated with something you thought or said when we first started talking about design process that prevents error? So anyone think of something that they noticed in the video that was particularly relevant? And put your comments in the chat box, and I'll see what we come up with. Okay, Paul, the first thing you've mentioned there, involving the contractor early. Maybe Paul, can I ask you to just comment on that from your own experience? How easy is that, or what's your experience of that?
Yeah, sure. I think, probably similar to others on the call. I think if we look at the projects that we've done where we have got involved early, we've been able to deconflict issues. We've been able to kind of shape and inform and iterate the approach there. And likewise, when we've not been involved early and involved late, then a lot of the problems have come home to roost later in the day. So we're always keen to get involved as early as we possibly can.
Interesting. And are you saying that from a contracting side?
Yes, from Langerock, yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Interesting. We've got a comment here: time to properly design and investing in design at the early stages. So I think that was Aaron said that. So Aaron, can you just expand on that? Your experience of investing early or not investing early?
Yeah, I think that's a challenge these days. It appears the cost of living crisis has hit construction just as much as everyone else's pockets at home, and a lot of delivery partners, clients out there are wanting more for nothing, particularly on in design. And it's very interesting to hear that the outputs of ultimately the end of the day are very much impacted by making the right decisions to invest in design early in the process, and not just the financial incentive to get involved and commit, but that investment in an appropriate amount of time for the team to work collaboratively through the designs to get to appropriate solutions.
Interesting, and particularly pertinent that you bring up there that you think is actually getting harder, not easier at the moment to get that money up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show a link. Here you go. Here's a QR code. Now, if I can encourage you all, please, to get your phones out, and I'm sure all of you will have a phone either in your pocket or on your desk. If you point your camera at this QR code, it should take you straight to the design guide. You can also find the design guide if you just search GIRI design guide. And what I'd like you to do, please, is whilst we're all on the call, everyone just open it up and you'll have those 12 different themes, 12 different recommendations there in front of you. If anyone's managed it, please give me a thumbs up and I can just see whether or not that's working for people in the group. Got it? Yeah, we've got a few thumbs up there. Brilliant. So what we're going to do in a second is put you into breakout groups. So you'll be randomly assigned 5 or 6 people in a group. And what I'd like you to do, please, in those groups is 3 things. I'll show you here. I'll just come across. I would like you, please, to pick one person who's going to be the spokesperson for your group. So that person will be ready to type things into the chat box and speak about what you've spoken about. So pick one person. And then in your team, I'd like you to pick one of the themes. So pick one of those 12 themes that you think is particularly important. And then in your group, identify how you could apply that theme on your projects. So it might be, how do you already apply that? Or what might you do to apply that theme? So in your group, please pick one person who's going to be a spokesperson, pick one of the themes, and then identify practically what does that theme mean to you. Okay, so hopefully you had a reasonable chat there, probably with people you didn't know before. And we were asking you to do a few things, to pick one of the recommendations that you thought was particularly important, and then to discuss how you can apply it. What does it actually mean for you? So the first thing I'm going to ask, please, is can the nominated scribe from each of those groups, please just type in the chat box, what recommendation did you pick? So just tell us all, what did you pick? So if you can just quickly type that in. Okay, so we've got investing in design, culture, stakeholder management, culture, planning the design work. So, Gavin, can I just ask you what any immediate thoughts or reflections on seeing which topics were picked?
There's quite a range actually. I suppose I was expecting there's usual sort of the usual suspects of early contractor involvement input is one that typically is discussed. Interesting, lots of reference to stakeholder management, and I think we've all struggled, if that's a word, pretty appropriate word, with regards to developing designs and actually making sure that there's a fairly linear process in sharing and receiving input from stakeholders and making sure it's the right stakeholder rather than so almost going back to square one again if you're not engaging the right people. So that is very important. Of course, as a group, that's something which perhaps is slightly more out of our control. We're relying on the client or the client's representative to enable that engagement, or whoever perhaps prepared the brief in the first place. So, I mean, maybe one which hasn't been commented here, which it has direct links to stakeholder management, is the brief, and actually making sure that the brief is is reflective of actually what we're trying to achieve. Because if it's not, then then we will have issues with stakeholder management because we're not delivering on what and meeting those expectations.
Interesting, thank you. Anyone else got any observations about the ones that were picked? Surprised, anyone seen something and been surprised at what someone else has picked? Okay, well, what we'll do now is, can I ask your scribes again, please? If you write again what you looked at, what your recommendation was, but then just any bullet points of what did you think was the main thing for how this would apply to you? So just type in the box, how does this thing apply to you? And we'll just hear from some of the different groups. So if you can type that in now, please. Whilst you're doing that, Adrian, and maybe I'll come to you. You've noticed that nobody covered information management. Why do you mention that, Adrian? Oh, you're on mute, Adrian. It's auto mute, I'm afraid.
I look after information management for the business as well as design management. So that's definitely a challenge around to plan. You need to plan out what information you need to provide at each of the stages for approval and coordination. So yeah, some of the things I was about to type in was leadership and collaboration. So planning is very much intrinsic with information management.
Okay, yeah. So starting off saying,
I look after BIM as well, sorry.
Oh, and BIM, yeah. So actually it's all well and good saying, oh, we're all going to communicate well, but unless you actually explicit and enforce that method, it all falls over. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Interesting. Let's have a look at some of these answers. Okay, Andrew Walker, you've mentioned getting design completed before starting on site. I'm imagining a few people have got experience of that. Andrew, do you want to just expand on that and why you've put that?
Yeah, we just talked a bit about time pressures, that things seem to get pushed to the right, but the end date's still squeezed, as well as sometimes the client seems to be fixed on a start on site date that they're not willing to shift, so the design's getting squeezed. Then starting on site, and despite the best intentions, people building off not for construction drawings or trying to work in advance of getting issued for construction drawings. One of our people said the one site they'd been on that was a 7-year project, but they didn't start on site until year 4, and the design was 95% done, and it was the best project ever to work on, and it really opened his eyes to how much time pressure there is in construction, and when you have that extended period to develop the design, it was much better. But just to caveat that, the contractor was responsible for the design there, so the contractor was involved in the design. If you're just getting the design done 100% without contractor involvement, and then there's 100% done design, well then the level of change required, etc., that can be counterproductive. So 2 things: getting design almost complete or substantially complete, ideally 100% complete before starting, but having early contractor involvement in that design, including subcontractors, suppliers, where possible.
The other benefit of that, Andrew, is obviously when you receive the design, is understanding where there is perhaps incomplete elements of that design, and as having a proper process to be able to explain that and share that with you, because sometimes that's not that obvious, and obviously you'll progress through your own design and you'll discover there are aspects which perhaps were uncoordinated for whatever reason. And I think obviously everybody would like to be able to share a design which which is 100% complete or coordinated for that stage, but equally it's important to to be very open and highlight where perhaps things still need to be developed and whether that might need to be for a specialist designer.
Fascinating, thank you. So I'll just pick up on one from James here, where you mentioned the culture, getting the culture right from the outset. So James Thomas, can I ask you to maybe expand on that? What that actually looks and feels like in reality?
So we discussed about how you can actually have issues caused by not being transparent. So making sure that you've got openness and that every member of the kind of supply chain or contractual chains able to feel like they can communicate with the key stakeholders at all stages through a project. So just making sure that there's kind of probably a no blame culture created as well, where people, if they've got an issue, they can have an adult conversation, they can raise it, it can be elevated up through the contractual chain and the design team to the customer, etc.
Okay, really interesting. Does anyone else have any examples of where they've seen a culture that has worked? What does that actually tangibly feel like in reality? Don't know if anyone can unmute and give an example of where they found that.
Yeah, hi. I worked on a project that was via the initiative called the IPI, Integrated Project Initiative, and everybody from on the team is brought in at the start of the project, including the main contractor, including subcontractors. So everybody feels that they're a part of the project. It's team. It's not just I'm delivering this bit, I'm delivering this bit. And we found that, and again, in the contract itself, no blame is actually written in the contract itself that you sign up to. You know, and what it does, it looks at bringing people in with the right behavior. So before you even get into the project, you've got to go through a behavior workshop, and they put you in teams and see how you're going to work with other people. And they observe you, the client observes you, the IPI directors observe you, and they try to see, you know, how you're all going to work together, and what companies and what people are suited for that particular project. And it worked really well. It worked incredibly well on Dudley College. We did, and we, you know, we delivered that project together on time, in budget, because everybody had sight of everything. For example, we all had sight of the cost plan. We all had sight of quotes. We could all influence the design together right from the beginning, and everyone felt that they were part of the team and they could say anything if there's a problem. And it was never a problem. It was always just something that needs to be resolved, not pointing the blame at anyone.
That's brilliant. And I'm fascinated how it's really engaging with the fact that they're human beings involved. It's not a process. Gavin, anything that you sort of pick up on that and how that relates to the guide?
Well, I think what you said was the fact that everybody was brought on early, you know, early contractor input, and likewise with the other part of the team. I mean, it's very difficult to be part and you know, part of a project and to collaborate if you're sort of joining late and, you know, parties are already involved, and, you know, and there are certain, you know, perceptions and judgments about how things are going to be, you know, carrying out. So it's obviously not always appropriate to bring everybody involved early on, and, you know, project procurement is obviously, you know, vital in guiding that. But I mean, clearly there needs to be, you know, all members of the, you know, significant members of the project team, construction team, whatever, need to be, you know, involved as soon as possible, to really, you know, to ensure the success of a project, because it will just make it harder when these delays occur.
Great, thank you. Well, I'm very conscious of time because we're rapidly running out. So what I will do is I'll capture all these comments because they're great, thank you. And I'll hand back now to Cliff, who can wrap up and reflect on what we've covered. You're mute. I think you're muted, Cliff.
Sorry, I'm truly amazed by the content. I think it's so excellent that the input we've had has aligned so much with the thinking that went into the development of the guide, and it's really encouraging for us at GIRI that so many people are thinking along these lines. I think procurement's mentioned a few times, and clearly the method of procurement and the cost and this sort of cost price balance that goes on is something that affects the industry deeply, and we hope that clients will be more involved in thinking about how input to the design at the front end can really benefit their outcomes, and the culture and the collaboration that goes with that. Forms of contract, of course, have an impact, but I think if a client is thinking about an outcome and discussing that with advisors in terms of the project output, then the culture and collaboration need to be considered at that stage. Planning and information and tech. Yes, the information flow is clearly critical, and the need to take on board all the new technology that's available to assist information flow. This is something which is a much broader subject, but is again crucially important and was picked up. We don't talk about design management per se in the guide, but it's that robust approach. It's that sort of controlling mind, was mentioned by Ed in the video. I think design management flows through, doesn't it? And we think that's an important aspect. And it goes into that planning side, thinking about the process right at the beginning, planning it out, setting your gateways or milestones or whatever you choose to call them in your business. But that setting those milestones, achieving them and handing over to the next stage, really important. So I think it's very good that we've had this discussion today. We've got another couple of these for design forums in the process, and the next one which I'm particularly looking forward to is I think psychoanalysis, isn't it, Nick? And so great to see you all today. I hope you got something from this. I hope you got some takeaways, and we'll see you all in a few weeks' time. Thanks very much.